Welcome, welcome, welcome. Today we have an impactful message. If you're starting off with a business plan, a strategy, and you're looking for success with a Commonwealth mindset, today we're going to talk about how to influence and impact. All right. Thank you guys. I hope everybody's had a wonderful week. I know mine has been, ups and downs, and knocking on doors and doors opening, some doors closing. That's just part of it. But today we got a message that I think that you're going to enjoy, that I think you're going to like, and I think that it's going to impact you and influence you in a way that's a positive mindset. So, as you know me, we've been talking about kingdom principles. Today, as you see, we got a message. This particular message or this session, this training session, is how to influence and impact, right? We talked about how to influence in your house, how to influence in your business, how to influence in your community. That's what kingdom's about, right? Where it impacts and influences all the territories at which point a king adheres to, dominates, and influences. So that's the way that we should keep this mindset, a kingdom mindset. Let's get started. All right. As always, you could always look at this particular message down in the on my page, Marlon Amaya. In this case, I hope that this message brings you not only a different thought process, but gives you a way to think about it, right? Think differently. So let's get started. So we talked about influences. We talked about impact. There's many ways that you could impact. There's many ways that you could influence. But you have to keep in mind that there's always a positive and a negative. Which brings me to my first point. In order to have influence and to impact not only at your job, your work, your home, the people that you know, your colleagues, either being in business or networking, is you have to have a made up mind. So number one, a made up mind is a powerful thing. Let's think about that. When you have a made up mind, you know exactly where you're going. You know exactly what you want. You know exactly where you stand. You know exactly where you came from. You know exactly where you want to be. However, it does have its positives and its negatives. If someone has made up their mind to commit suicide, that's a powerful thing, right? They've made up their mind to no longer live in this earth. As a matter of fact, one of the most powerful, or the saddest thing rather, is to have success without purpose. Why? Because, usually when you see someone that makes or that, commits suicide, they leave a note and it says, I had no purpose to live. So this is why a made up mind is a powerful thing. It has its positive and it has its negatives. Now let's look at the positive side. A positive side is when you want to go, where you came from, where you stand, and how you're going to get there. So that's a number one mindset of how to influence and impact. Number two, you have to make up your mind about some things. So you have to make up your mind that you're not going to be liked. You have to make up your mind that you will not be accepted in some places. You have to make up your mind also that you don't have to go to every place. You don't have to please everybody, and no one's going to be pleased by you constantly or every time. So make up your mind about things. I've made up my mind exactly of what I wanted to do. And that is to do what I love. But most importantly, I don't want to be selfish. What I intend to is to impact and influence. to train and develop, to succeed, and to mentor, or to mentor and succeed rather, because without mentoring, there's no succession. So that's an important point. Number 3, to influence and impact. Now, again, this is the business plan, strategy, and success in Commonwealth based on kingdom principles. You know, a king's influence is determined by its atmosphere, its location, and its territories. So that means, like I always said, wherever your body goes, your senses are affected. What places have you been? What places have you seen? What things have you heard? What things have you seen? What things have you smelled? What things have you spoken? And what things have you felt? So, wherever your body goes, your senses are affected. So, in this case, point number 3, in order to influence and impact, you have to communicate the language of your market. Words are powerful. You know, in a kingdom, they call it, any kingdom that wants to obtain any new territory, it's called colonization, which we talked about this in our prior videos. You know, the word colonization has its manifestation and first colon. So that means that if you came from a particular sector of, geographically speaking, of Central America, South America, Africa, North or Southern Africa, Europe, you know, all of these are colonizations of bigger and more powerful empires. So in this case, you have to communicate. The first thing is, before you repent, which means change the way you think, and means to go back to your original state. So change the way you think and go back to your original state, meaning your original purpose in this world. You have to change your language. So that means that in any colonization, the colon starts where? In the mouth. In this case, your tongue. And it ends in the rectum at the end, rear end. So that means that whatever you hear will come out of here. And of course, anything that is stored will stay here and will develop what is called your subconscious, meaning the things that are within your soul that are developed throughout series of time, right? This could be months, years, decades. So to communicate the language of your market, words are powerful. You know, if you're in real estate, or if you're, I used to be a painter. I remember when I started painting back in 2019, I did not expect, COVID to hit. And, at that point, I already had a plan going on. I had a strategy. I had the market. I wanted to do both residential and commercial. But I focused mostly in residential because I saw that there was a higher input, meaning there was going to be a ROI, a return of investment, a higher one. So, because at that point, when you go to a commercial, everything is just strategized and organized. Buildings look the same, doors look the same, hallways look the same, rooms look the same. But when you go to a residential, all is different. And specifically with different sectors of the market, meaning low class, middle class, or high class. That means that you could upcharge at a higher rate because what? Not only there's the market, you're using better tools, better equipment, better paint. Your preparation is more sought after or thought process. You think about it more than as opposed one that's commercial. Now, don't get me wrong, commercial is great because at the same time, you're dealing with a business. At that point, you can add a commercial rate. Nonetheless, communicate the language of the market. Know the lingo of that particular market. know the lingo of how people communicate, the networking of that particular market. What connects painting? Well, painting could connect drywall. Drywall could connect painting. Painting could connect to pressure washing, or it could connect to landscaping. Landscape can connect to lightings. Lightings can connect to, and so on and so forth. So you have to speak the language, and you have to have references as well. So words are powerful. What comes out of your mouth, what goes in here, stays in here, then comes out of here. Thus, understanding what that market is. Number 4, in order to influence and impact, you have to communicate the message of your presence and the market. So notice that I said communicate the message. So in this case, there has to be a thought process before the language. And the message is organized and thought after before you could go ahead and speak. Thus, once you speak properly and adhere to whatever market that you're in, your presence will be known. Remember that I said that the 2 most powerful things that you possess is what? Your ideas and your body. So the message is here. Your presence is your body. I like to call that being an agent of change. Why? Because agent is a legal word. To be an agent is to be legalized as a representative of a country, a nation, or institution. In other words, it could be either incorporated, or unincorporated. So, number 4, communicate the message and the presence in the market. You know, when Jesus Christ told his disciples, he says, go and teach this message. That is important there. Emphasize on this, because he did not say that message or go that way. He says, preach this message. The kingdom of heaven is at hand. Some other translation says it's near. The word near in the Greek meaning means to be at hand, meaning present. It's going on now. So what was the message? Number 1, the kingdom of heaven. It did not say the kingdom of Britain nor the kingdom of Persia. It says the kingdom of heaven, at which my Father, which is the King, will influence through me, the Prince of Peace, which I am also the leader of the commander. So he had a mindset made up. There was a message. He came from a presence from heaven, meaning, they asked Jesus one time, tell us plainly, where are you from? He did not say, I am from Israel, Nazareth, and I was born in Bethlehem. No, he said, I come from heaven. Very, very important point. So he says, I come from heaven. See, he was born in Bethlehem. He did business. And in this case, he's from the heaven. So he was plainly telling them the message, and he was giving them, manifesting his presence in the market. What market? Well, the market of fishing. In this case, man fishing. When Jesus in Matthew first encountered Simon Peter, which his first name is Simon, but he went by Peter because Jesus Christ changed his name. And the reason why he changed his name is because he said that he was, or he is, the Messiah or the Christ to come to save them. He says, upon that Peter, right? And then comma. So Peter came first, and then comma came after. So that means that he says, upon this rock, this little pebble, right? That's what the name Peter means, right? It's a description of a manifestation. So Peter means upon this little rock, upon this idea, that's the message that I'm trying to convey and convince you of. Very, very important. Which brings me to my fifth point. In order to be influential in your business plan, the strategy of success, and Commonwealth, you have to convince and convey and not offend. Woo! You know, I have problems with that one sometimes because I come out straightforward, assertive, and transparent. Jesus Christ was straightforward, assertive, and transparent. But he chose and picked the certain people who he needed to be assertive, direct. So if you notice in the whole New Testament, who he fought or was against was what? The system of religion. Right? These Pharisees and these Sadducees, right? So Pharisees means chosen by the few. Sadducees means representatives of a temple. So these Sadducees were, in this case, were priests of these particular temples who would obtain the knowledge and the training of the laws and statutes of the old laws, Moses' laws, or the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible. So in order to influence and impact, in order to convince and convey, but not offend, Jesus was straightforward to those who he needed to be. But then when he spoke in parables, his disciples or his students, that's what the word disciples means, student, and master or teacher, right? That's what master means, to be a teacher or to have the magistry in a particular sector of teaching. So in this case, he said, his disciples asked him, Lord, why do you speak to them in parables? It's because only the chosen ones, only the few should know about the kingdom. That's very, very important, because the chosen ones does not reflect a particular sector of a demographic nor geographically, meaning it does not convey the information about only if you're a Jew, you're a chosen one, or if only you're a Israelite, you're a chosen one. No, that's not what he was saying. There's a story about this woman, a Samaritan woman to be exact. And the Samaritan woman came up to Jesus as he was walking, I believe, in Galilee or towards Galilee. And she came up to him and said, Lord, I have a sick daughter. And then Jesus totally rejected her. But not reject her as saying, hey, don't get near me because you're not part of this chosen people. Rejected her because of, and I'll give you the answer. The woman said, if you're willing, please heal my daughter. And he says, and I'm paraphrasing, we do not help, or we throw out, or we don't help the people that are dogs or eat or something like that, right? And then the woman said, well, even the dogs eat this, the crumbs from the floor. A lot of people think that he was rejecting her, but what he was talking about was citizenship. Because the Samaritans decided to have their own separate country or nation when they were being exiled from Babylon. So in this case, they had different beliefs, or the Jews did not want to associate with them because they worship, deities and, other gods, plural. And a lot of people think that that particular passage is talking about him rejecting her. No, it's about citizenship or citizenry. So he was telling her, hey, he's like, because of your faithfulness, yes, she is healed. And she was healed instantly. So, to convince and convey and not to offend. So he was not trying to offend her. He was just referring to citizenship, because they decided not to be a citizen or a part of the Jews at that point. They wanted their own separate nation and their own laws and their own leaders. That's why. So if you heard of that particular story of the woman and the crumbs of the dog, or dog's crumbs, look it up. It's very, very impactful. You'll read it. Number 6, in order to influence and impact, in order to be a leader or a kingdom leader, to impact and not impose. Man, that's so important. Because sometimes we try to push ourselves or our business, right, into people's faces. Do you like it when someone throws out a card? Oh, here, take a card. And you don't even ask for it? Of course, you're more than welcome to receive it. But nonetheless, if they don't ask for it, why give it to them? Because at that point, you're imposing. So find strategies so that you could go ahead, in this case, communicate the language of the market. The words are powerful. If people don't hear you, or if you don't promote yourself in that particular market, if you don't have a message nor your presence, it's hard to convince and convey and not to offend. So therefore, it's harder to impact, yet now you're just imposing. So to influence, you have to impact without imposing. Jesus Christ was the greatest person that impacted. Why? Because he never imposed. Let's think about it. Anytime a person with a disease, a skin disease, at those times it was leprosy, or they were blind, or they were mute, or in this case they couldn't walk. What is the question he always asked? He said, "Do you want to be healed?" Does that sound like imposing? He specifically wanted them to say, do you want to be healed of this particular disease? Alcoholism is a disease. And it's hard for you to just quit cold turkey. It could be cigarettes, it could be drugs, prescription, or man-made. I was recently in an interpretation for my job. I was at SCF, and I was in the traffic in school, and I had to go and interpret for this particular guy. And in this case, one of the things that I remember the teacher, as he was teaching, and I'm conveying the information and translating for my client, one of the things that he said, I remember my daughter, I could tell when she gets in the room, and I could automatically tell when she is drunk, or she has something or she had something to drink. And he said, do you know how I could tell? He says, because when she goes in the room, she automatically starts giggling, does not look at me in the eye. But the first thing as a father, he said, I did not impose her. Now, some parents might say, well, You get a kid coming in drunk at your house, your child or whomever it is. First thing is like reactive. What are you doing at this time? This blah blah. He's like, whatever you do, he says, I had a talk with her. Whatever you do, all I want you to do is to communicate with me as to where you are and what time you're coming home. That is the only rule I want. And then he says, when you do come home, right, make sure that you always let me know that you're outside, because I don't want a message just to say I'm on my way and then you never get home. So he communicated, he convinced her, he conveyed to her without offending her, nor him or her offending him. Of course, there is some kind of offense, of your kid coming in drunk or whatever to the home. I mean, I'm guilty. I can't sit here act like I was perfect or whatnot, but nonetheless, the impact that gave, that was it was impactful, not imposeful. So he did not impose in a way that I was reactive. And we're going to talk about reactiveness and proactiveness in a little bit, but nonetheless, I thought that was a great example of not only a parenting skill, but also a way to impact and not impose, because at that point, what that creates is not only a communication management, it creates a trust management, but it also creates a responsibility management. So all those three impacted and did not impose. Now, in this case, obviously, take the time to talk to your kids, to your loved ones, and say, hey, communication is, is the best. Because at that point, if you can't trust the ones that you love, why even, or you fill in the blanks. Nonetheless, let's keep going. Number 6, to influence and to impact, you have to create a reason and not a rejection. So again, create a reason and not a rejection. What's the reason as to why I should follow you? You should believe me, right? So again, the reason is why. Why am I doing this? What's the purpose? Who am I trying to influence? Well, the purpose is that I'm trying to influence and impact because I want to mentor and I want to have succession. I didn't have a mentor in my life, right? Both of my parents worked hard their whole life. So that gave me a lot of time to do other things, right? Now, of course, you might say, well, that's good, Marlon. You had 2 parents that worked hard. But in reality, the reality is if both parents are working at the same time, right, there's really no energy that you could bring, not because of your own fault, but because of the fact that, hey, there are other priorities like putting food on the table, having a roof over your head, right? So therefore, there's a slight change in the impact level. So create a reason and not a rejection. In other words, strategy through wisdom to appeal the believers. You have to be strategic in everything that you do. If you're cooking food, right, the emotion comes first. What do I feel like eating today? What would satisfy me? Right? Or you will ask the question, hey, hun, hey, sweetie, what do you feel like eating today? Well, I will feel like eating a hamburger. I feel like eating today enchiladas. Oh, what's the reason you like them? Oh, because I remember you added all these types of ingredients, which I do love. See, sometimes knowing the reason is why you make it is because it makes the other person feel loved by preparing something that they enjoy, or taking them somewhere that they enjoy, or taking them somewhere or giving them something that reflects and that gives an appeal. At that one point, it impacted their life in a meaningful way, thus not creating a rejection. So strategize through wisdom to appeal to the believers. Who will believe you? If you don't believe yourself, then that means no one will take the time to believe your product, your service, and in this case, their love, right? Jesus Christ, it says, I love because the Father loves. Notice that he said, I love because the Father loved. So now he had an example. He says, this is how I've been treated, or I have felt in my life. Now, this could get tricky because sometimes people put walls, and that's okay. I remember I heard this story, and I can't remember what exactly it was, but it talks about these two friends, right? They've been friends for a long time, and he was talking about, what is the true definition of friendship? And as he's giving his definition, he was telling this particular story. He's like, one of my best friends, his wife died. And then he says, the worst thing I could do is says, I'm here for you. And the worst thing that I could do is ask, how are you doing? Or how are you feeling? You know pretty well how they're doing and how they're feeling. There's no need for you to ask them. I mean, it's redundant. But what he said, here's what I'm going to do for you. And I don't care if you get mad at me. He says, I'm going to call you each day at 9:45 p.m. Now, I don't expect you to answer. I don't expect you to pick up the phone. I don't expect anything from you. But I'm going to call every day at 9:45 for the next 6 months. And in this case, he called every day. Now, at first, he didn't pick up. Then he rejected the calls. But the fact that he would see his name, in this case, his friend's name, on the phone, right, gave him a reason and not a rejection. So he was strategizing with wisdom to appeal to the believers, that's right. Because if you just say, I'm here for you, that's just washy-washy stuff, right? I don't just want you here on my bad times. I want you here on my wins as well. Because everyone could be there. As a matter of fact, some people love to only be there in the bad times. But they're never there in your good times. Does that sound familiar? When you're a believer and you gave your life to Jesus and you repented, isn't it true that when you're having a good time, everything's all lined up, you have no worries, you have no depression, no oppression, you have no sadness, you seem to forget your loved ones, right? You seem to forget the ones that brought you there. You seem to forget your friends. Because sometimes there's this attachment involved as to these persons or these friends, right? Or family in these cases. They want to be able to be tangled only when there's a bad time, so that you could reference those two and be like, hey, I've always been there at that time, but when there's a good time, oh, no, it's all right. Yeah, it's all good. So sometimes people want to share their wins, right? When a child came up to you and says, or when you were a child, you went up to your dad or your mom and said, "Hey, dad, mom, I got an A on my class," right? You wanted someone to be proud of you. So make sure it's authentic, though, that you said, "I'm really, really proud of you," right? So think about that as well. Number seven. Number seven is win friends, not converts. You know, this goes hand in hand with impacting and not imposing. When anytime you want to have any connection with anybody, is forgetting about what your spiel is or what you thought in your head that you wanted to say right after each comment or at each sentence of someone else's, that you already have in your mind, "Oh, I'm trying to say this," right? Make friends first, not converts. In this case, this also includes employees, prospects, customers, clients, etc. They will convert into believers on how interested you are. How interested are you in a conversation? I worked in sales, or anybody that's in sales, right? I mean, pretty much anything is sales, right? If you're in a marital relationship, you're selling ideas, right? What ideas are you selling? Your upbringings, your education, your your likes, your dislikes. These are all ideas, excuse me, that you're trying to sell. Yes, sell. Because at that point, you're listening to the other person as well. What ideas benefit you? Which ones don't? What ideas impact you? Which ones don't? What ideas influence you? Which ones don't? And back and forth, right? So in this case, how interested are you on what the person is saying, right? Now, don't get me wrong. I sometimes sit with some people. If it doesn't add to my life, I am not going to sit there and listen to you. I'm sorry. I'm really not. I'm just going to politely get up, not impose. I'll say politely, I'll say, that is something that I'm not interested in talking about. I apologize, but I have to get out. It's direct, it's honest, and it's not being rude. It is saying what you're saying and what's in your head does not give me, or in this case, it's not interested enough, or it's affecting me in a way. But at the same time, I remember one time I was sitting down with a person that I hadn't seen in a while. And, well, actually, this was a person I did not know. But I remember I went to a dining room and I sat down, and total stranger. I mean, this was a guy that had the attitude of just talking to anybody, right? He's like, "Do I know you from anywhere?" And I said, "Honestly, sir, I'm going to be transparent with you. I do not know you. But if you think you know me, where do you think have you seen me?" See, I'm trying to get exactly to the pinpoint. He's like, "I think I seen you at this particular church." And I said, "Nope, I've never been to that church. However, I would like to know more about it." So that's what sparked the conversation. I was honest about it, because sometimes we get influenced by just agreeing with somebody, at which point you may sound like you're interested, but you're really not. So in this case, you're not being authentic and not being honest. See, you could be assertive and transparent. Usually people think that when you're assertive and transparent, you're being rude. But remember your tonality. I said, no, sir. I don't think I do know you, and I don't think I've associated with you. But yet, he says, and then I asked the question, where have you seen me? So I went straight to, where have you seen me? Because that's he's saying, I know you and I've seen you before. And I know sometimes that's a strategy as well to start a conversation or spark a conversation. But I wanted to go ahead and nip it in the butt right away without being rude. I was like, no, that's not true. Because I would remember. And sometimes you don't remember people, right? Or people change or whatever. But nonetheless, in this case, sound, win friends, not converts. In this case, once he started talking, he's like, you know what? That's a very interesting point that you're saying. And what you're saying and what's coming, you got some important points that I would love to get to know a little bit more. And then we introduced ourselves, and he said, oh, that's great. I like your input on that. So I was generally interested of getting to know that person. I wasn't just, I was hungry. I was eating, right? But I took the time to give him the time of day. And I also remember another thing is sometimes, as I spoke earlier, sometimes some people just want to lay it all on you, meaning they just want someone to hear them. And I'm totally okay with that as well. Because sometimes I remember one time I was trying to talk with somebody and, I had everything in my mind already. I had the things I wanted to say. I had the language and how I wanted to portray it or convey it in a convincing manner. I had the message. I was present mentally and physically. I wanted to impact. I already, had everything in mind. We had set up this particular meeting. And then as he was going, and I just said, I just was generally interested. I was asking him, we're having a dialogue. As he was speaking, I was like, well, what do you mean by that? Like, it's okay to say, what do you mean by that when you don't understand? Because sometimes we don't know the context of how the person is trying to explain that information. And keep in mind also that people put barriers on how they speak, meaning they hold back some information because in this case, they're afraid of being judged. Or they're afraid of giving too much information. So keep that in mind as well. Let's continue. Let's move over here. All right. So that was number 8, really. Win friends, not converts. And in this case, how interested are you, right? And here are just a couple of principles of impact. So, number 1, principles of impact. I've stated before, I'm not the smartest, I'm not the most educated, but you can never go wrong with what? With principles, right? And it took me more than 35 years to come up with that comment. You can never go wrong with principles. And there's always time to add the principles that you were missing. So, principle number 1, never confuse semantics with humane substance. What does that mean? So, in this case, in other words, don't be petty, be sensible. I remember I was having a conversation and this was at a barbershop. I was getting my haircut, really, I talk a lot when I'm here, but when I'm alone, I like my thought process thinking time because I have Bible open. I have a book that I'm interested. I'm writing. I have references from probably a day, 2 weeks, months ago, and even years ago, right? That I got a notebook and I just go back and forth and just see, just to strategize and get the right wording and message out. So, and in this case, they were asking me, they were asking me a religious question. They're like, so if someone came into your home, because we were talking about, hey, if someone hurts you, give one cheek. If someone hurts you on one cheek, give the other cheek. And then, right away, my face, I was like, okay. And he saw the reaction, and then which posted a reaction to ask me, for him to ask me a question, which was, well, what about, let's say if someone goes into your house and breaks into your house, and they want to hurt you or your daughter. And I said, simple. I pick up the phone and call 911. They say, oh, but you're supposed to give the other cheek. I'm like, listen to me. And if I could use the Christianity or religion in this context, I said, Christianity or religion has nothing to do with being sensible. I said, the wise thing to do is to pick up the phone and to call the police. Because I know that if you hurt somebody in your home, you could still be convicted of killing somebody or hurting somebody, and they could sue you as well. Which leads me to another thought process. What is this world come up to? I mean, really, nonetheless, I don't want to get into a topic, but, don't be petty, just be sensible. Never confuse semantics with human substance. People know how interested you are or not interested you're in. People know right off the back, right, of the things that come out of your mouth, what type of person you're currently at or what stage of life you're currently in, right? Um, Nonetheless, number two, identify with the interests of the market. You have to identify with the interests of the market. Either if you're being an influencer or a business, real estate, selling tacos, food, a business, a cleaning business, you know, identify with the interests of the market. Always be open mind, and you don't be a jack of all trades. Don't be a jack of all trades. Be the jack of that trade, meaning know everything you have to know about that particular trade, so that you could become one that could be that knows the market and the interests of your clients or non-believers. So, in other words, number two, it's not about self-interest, but about the person, about the places, or about the things you're trying to reach. Right? So it has nothing to do with your self-interest or self-interest whatsoever. So in order to identify with the interests of the market, identify with the interests of the market, know your market, strategize, know the people, right? Or what people do they know that I may reach? Sometimes when, I try not to impose, and when I do give I say, hey, look, be honest with me, how did I do? You know, and they're like, I think you did great, honestly. I'm like, I appreciate that, because feedback is so important. But make sure that in some cases, don't try to overwhelm people with information or imposing. Very important. Number three, understand their concepts. In other words, if you're trying to go or take new territory, either being at church or either being as a impactful influencer, not just on video or whatnot, but in your home or your family, understand their concepts, learn, implement systems management. Right. One of the things that I remember, I partnered up with this particular company, and one of the things that I remember, there was like a meeting room, and we were sitting in this particular meeting room, and it was the owner, it was the operations manager, it was the marketing manager, it was the I think it was the warehouse manager, and we're I'm feeling nervous, but at the same time I'm like, I'm confident. I know exactly the implementations. I learned their systems, and I remember when I saw their walls, it was about stewardship. They had all these plaques about stewardship and about service, and customer service is about stewardship. And I actually took a whole bunch of pictures. I'm like, wow. And one of my goals was to, anytime, well, specifically, the type of work that I do, I not only do interpretation and translation and business management, but I'm a business consultant. So in this case, I have to go in as a stranger, right? As one that says, oh, this guy's going to come in and is going to teach us. And he thinks he knows what he's talking about. But anytime I'm dealing with huge, intimidating companies or individuals, I remember of what my grandma used to tell me. She said, the greatest act of leadership is how you broom. And then, what do you mean, Marlon? Well, look at someone, how they broom, right? How they sweep the floor, how they use the broom. Do they start in the bathroom or start at the kitchen and then just sweep everything and then that's it? Or hide it underneath the carpet, right? Or do they sweep the living room and then just open the door and just toss everything outside? I mean, how much care do you put in sweeping? Not too much care, right? You don't even put that much thought into it. But she said, a great leader sweeps each corner, meaning he wants to know exactly what's in each corner. What are the pain points of each of their individual employees? Which brings me to another point. Any employee any employer rather, or any business owner that wants their employees to work harder and tougher and smarter and more hours than the employer, that employer is a disease and it's sickening. Why? Because you're there to manifest, to mentor succession. What are your employees' pain points? What are your employees' weakness? What are their strengths, right? If it comes up to, if it means that you want to make a certain amount of money, right? You want to make $60,000 a year, 70 a year, 80 a year. And if an employee comes up to me and says, this is the conversation we were having, because I like to be direct with these bullies. I hate corporate bullies. I hate business owners that don't want to do their job themselves, that they want their employees to be slaves, or they want them to work harder than they do. That is ungodly. Look at Jesus Christ. It says, if you look at the New Testament, anytime that he went out and preached the gospel, which is the kingdom of heaven, right? It says that he would, at any time that he wanted to go into a new territory or to a new village, it says, and he will get on his boat and cross to the other side. Wow. That's impactful, because if he's willing to get on the boat and row rather, right? He's willing to cross to the other side where no one has ever crossed before. So why is it that you, as an employer or a business owner, want your employees to do the same? You want them to do your job. So one of the questions that I asked them was the following. I said, whose job is it to run this company? I shut them up automatically. I said, it is your job, sir. And his face got red because I was being assertive. One moment. No, creo que está trabajando mañana en la tarde. Bueno, mañana en el día. O sea, que más que las 8:30. Yo creo, pero no contesta. Okay. Yeah. All right. All right. Sorry for the interruption. Nonetheless, let's keep going. So, understanding the concepts, learning and implementing the system management, right? The first thing when you get into a particular new position or a dream or endeavor, either you want to go into business or whatnot, the first thing that you should learn is the system management, right? What is system management? Is the management of different systems, right? Management of marketing, the system of marketing, the system of, in this case, wording, right? How to write or how to uh, implement a privacy policy, how to write a disclosure of information, right? Public or company, you know, learning the CRMs, which are the client retention management systems, which are in this case like, hey, how do you retain all the client's information, right? Learning that particular system. If you're running a business of where you're selling food or products or whatnot, learning the register, right? It just takes you back to your takes me back to my retail days. But nonetheless, um, for example, I have experience in retail. So one of my business in training is in retail as well, right? Retail is very important, right? It's inventory management, products coming in, products going out. FIFO, FIFO means first in, first out. Are we rotating? You know, are we scanning the particular items that just came in? Bill of lading, reporting. Are we saving it to the client's um, profile, right? So system management is keeping your calendar. All these things are involved, right? Are you putting back into your own company, right? Are you investing back in your own company and in your inventory, right? Whatever that inventory means. If you're in real estate, well, I need paper. Right? I print a lot of postings of homes, land, whatever it is. You know, I need a whole bunch of highlighters, whatever. I need ink, right? So all these involve of how to manage your systems. So implementing and managing systems. Number 4, never confuse principles with facts. The difference is one is permanent and the other one is transient, right? Have you ever heard or had a particular, colleague or employee or, that just knows it all and they're like facts check all the time. But the problem with facts is that they could be rebutted by new, more efficient, and up-to-date facts, right? So in this case, the difference between principles and facts is that one is permanent, principle is a permanent. 1 plus 2 is 3. ABC is the same thing, right? The principle of gravity, the principle of biology, right? So you have all these principles. You can never go wrong with principles. So if you have a debate about homosexuality, the principle is easy. Doesn't mean I'm a homophobic. I just say, well, there's an entrance and there's an exit. That's it. I don't have to debate about anything. You don't have to convince me about anything. So I know that there's an entrance and an exit, plain and simple. And that lets you know where I stand. So the principle is I could sit down with someone that's gay, with someone that's transgender, and I could speak to them and talk to them. But when I talk about principles, right, there's no rebuttal about it. And it's just simple as that. Number 5, represent ingenuity, right? Ingenuity has to deal with being genuine. How can you demonstrate true genuineness? Well, number 1, by self-identification. Number 2, by evaluation. Number 3, by limitations. Do you know them? Do you know what's your self-identification? Meaning, I know where I came from. I know who I am. I know where I'm standing. I know where I'm going. And I know who's coming with me. Not everybody will be coming with you in your vision and your mission. You have to make your mind about that. You are not here forever, right? So if you're in your 60s, 70s, 80s, and even 90s year old, make up your mind that you're going to die already, right? I live a strange way, meaning I have made up my mind that I will die. Hopefully, by the grace of God, he's the only one that knows when that's going to happen. But what that does is that it makes me not trust everyone. What am I trying to say? I cannot trust anybody for the rest of my life because I know they're going to die and I know I'm going to die. Let me put it to you in other ways. I cannot trust anybody enough that I can't live without you. That means is that this gives me an opportunity to live my life to the fullest that I can towards my colleagues, my interpersonal life, my personal life, my relational life, either being romantic or non, my relationship with my boss or my partner, my business partner, right? So all these things, you have to have these conversations as to, hey, if and when which I know I'm going to die, who will be the beneficiary? Who will be the trustee? Am I creating a trust fund? Right? Would this person be able to manage this at a level that I want him to manage it? Are we leaving a legacy that adds and not takes? Right? You know, there's a lot of famous people out there, and you could do your own research. And they said, every penny that I make, I am not leaving it to none of my children. That's a choice, right? So make up your mind about what you're trying to choose, right? At the time that you're currently here and at the time that you're not going to be here anymore, present. Who will you entrust to? Your ideas and your legacy, your property, your physical, untangible property. So all of these things are very, very important. So that was number 5 on represent ingenuity. How can you demonstrate the true genuineness? By what? By self-identification, by evaluation. You have to evaluate yourself each quarter. You have to evaluate your relationships. You have to evaluate your job. You have to evaluate your home. Is it organized? Right? Just like seasons change, change is inevitable. Some people say, "Oh, I've never changed. I'm the same since I was 15 years old." That is a total lie. Because if you didn't change from you were 15 years old, I feel sorry for you. I'm sorry. You have to reevaluate yourself. Limitations. You have to know your limitations. What are you capable of and what you're not capable of. It relieves the headaches. It relieves the confusions. It relieves conflict. One of the toughest things to see is watching your parents grow old. Or in some cases, to some, watching your parents die, right? Or a loved one die, or a friend. That is a painful situation. But what's more painful is watching someone that died without a purpose, right? There's people that are living that are dying slowly. Yes, you have the monetary gains. You have the property, you have a home, you have the cars. But what else are you missing? Are you limited to this? Are you not limited to that? Do I know this about me? Do I not know this about me? Do I evaluate myself about this? Because just because winter ends, right? Spring is coming. So you're not going to put up that jacket or that sweater and throw it away. You're going to put it up on a hanger and hang it, right? And you're going to save it for next winter because it's your favorite jacket or, whatever the case might be. That same with a hurricane, right? The greatest revelation, right? Or the greatest limitation here on earth is when God said, I will no longer destroy the earth by water. How do we know that? Well, we know it because the rainbow comes. He says that will be a sign for remembrance, right? That I will not destroy my people again with water. Very, very, very impactful. Number 6, use illustrations of the market. This is how you reach sectors of different markets, right? What is currently going on now doesn't mean you have to go by that particular market. I remember Chris Tomlin, which is a famous Christian singer uh, and worship leader. He says, there's different markets out right now, specifically in the Christian worship music. He says, I've been doing this for more than 30 years, and my whole market has been the same, is to worship and to talk. All my songs comes from the book of Psalms, he said. says, I'm not going of what the Christianity market is. So, hey, change these words so you could attract more outsiders. No, he said, I'm staying with the market. He says, and that market is Jesus Christ. Very, very impactful. So in this case, make sure it is within your capacity, your scope, and scale. Did you do your homework? Right? So make sure it's within your capacity, your scope, and scale. Very, very important. Which goes with knows your limitations. Number 7, quote sources with authority and timeline. You know, one of my pet peeves, everyone has pet peeves, but one of my pet peeves is when people say it is the way it is. And I just cringe because, what is the way it is? Who made it the way it is? Why is it made that way? And why can it be changed? Or why can it stay this way? Right? I guess it's just the way I think. I'm analytical. I'm sorry. But nonetheless, quote sources with authority and timeline. You can never say, I've learned everything by myself. There's always something that influenced you or someone that influenced you in a particular way. What do I say? I said it before. I said, wherever your body goes, your senses are affected. What are you listening to? What are you watching? What are you saying? What's stuck in here, right, that hasn't been going out? Or what came through here or here, which came out through there, right? So all these things are affected, right? So quote sources with authority and timeline. Be obscure. Don't sound cheesy or read words by word. Manage your attitude. Number 1, attitude determines direction. One of my other pet peeves is that I remember I was holding a conference on Zoom just yesterday, actually. And the person said, and I said, well, okay, well, can you run me down on what's going to be the process? What should I be expecting? What's the topic about? What can I do on my end? What do you need me to do on my end? Not only logistically, systematically, and analytically, so that we could better have and save each other's time. Now, one of the things is that we were having problems with the audio, right? And in this case, she was going through her whole spiel of, hey, do this, do that. And I already had fixed the issue, right? And at which point I said, ma'am, I know you can hear me perfectly. She's like, okay, yes, I can hear you perfectly. But I wanted to explain. I'm like, ma'am, I don't need you to explain. The problem is solved already. So I was direct. And this was a female. And I was speaking with authority, right? And at which point she's like, I've done my homework, I said. I took the time before we got on the phone to learn about everything that we were going to talk about. At which point I already have a copy. Now I've read through it and I want to go ahead and talk down and focus on what this is going to be so that we can save each other's time and effort. Would you agree that you want to save time and effort? And then she said, you know what? I don't like your tone. And I said, well, ma'am, it's not about tone. It's about that I've done the system management. I've done the communication management. At which point, I want you to respect my time. She said, I cannot deal with you right now. I'm going to give you to my supervisor. That is fine. I said, I'll wait patiently. See, that is a good example of being assertive without being rude, right? being honest and transparent. I said, my attitude was, let's get down to business. Now, in this case, next one, manage your attitude, your belief systems, attributes. That's the stuff you were born with, such as, well, your attributes has to do with the stuff you're born with. What are those stuffs? Well, one of them is your talents, right? Your God-given talents, your gifts, right? Now, gifts and talents are different. It says in the Bible that the Holy Spirit will provide the gifts, which thus will produce the fruit of the Spirit. Your aptitude is different. Your aptitude is the training of those gifts. You know, if you're called in ministry, they call it, right? You were called to preach. You were called to, to serve as a steward. You were called to preach the word. You were called to serve in ministry, meaning in music, playing guitar, playing the piano, whatever it is. You have to increase those gifts. And that's what aptitude is the training of gifts, which means you have to increase of the knowledge and study of those gifts. You know, I remember in elementary school, and this was, I believe, the third or second day of school, like literally the first or second day of school. And I remember there was an assembly, they call it an assembly, where, all the grades, first through fifth, get together and you go into the cafeteria and, they have different things and awards or whatnot. And I remember I signed up to, and literature, I signed up for literature of writing. Now, what was it, like 7, maybe 8 years old? And I remember, I'm not saying I'm the greatest writer, but nonetheless, I'm trying to improve, right? And I remember my topic was the girl of my dreams. And I got on stage. There was probably hundreds of students and faculty staff. And I remember, my teacher, she's like, Marlon, remember what we talked about, the stuff that you got, it's already in you. But you have to train to look at the crowd and not too much at your writing. And I remember, I got up there, make the story short, I was looking down too much like this, and then looking this, and looking down like this, and looking like this. And then I remember I think it was probably like next week or whatever, I think it was that same day. They were giving out the results as to who was the winner. So I got second place, and I was bummed out, but I said, second place is not that bad. And my teacher or the principal was like, Marlon, that was one of the greatest speeches you ever did. But we gave you second place because you were not interacting with your crowd. You were looking too much at the writing. So I said, oh man. And I still vividly remember this, and it's something that I always try to improve on. So increase of knowledge and study. And finally, altitude. Altitude is basically changing the level of association, destination, vision, and mission in alignment with purpose. So we have attitude, we have aptitude, we have altitude. 3 different things. Your attitude will give you the direction. Your aptitude will give you the training. Once you have the increasement of knowledge and study, and finally, you will have your altitude, which is changing the level of association, destination, vision, mission, and alignment with your purpose. So you will not get the altitude without the purpose and without the prior ones. Which brings me to my last 8 principles. 8 cognitive influence principles, that is. How can we influence our cognitive system, right? Number 1, retain attentive information. What does it mean? Your habits produces retention, negative and positives. It's just simple as that. Having a system or an agenda written down each day, it's hard work. But it gives you the rundown of what to expect every day. The same thing is with your relationships. Your personal, your interpersonal, your and relational, your business or entrepreneurship, right? Habits produces retention. It produces negatives and positive. Just like a father, right? He's the provider of a home, right? You got his wife that comes up to him and says, honey, you're working 16 hours a day. That means that you don't have that much time for me. Or vice versa, whatever the case might be. And if you didn't talk about this, then that means there's going to be conflict. The habit of working 16 hours a day will what? Produce revenue, monetary gains, right? Even promotions at your job, right? But the negative factor would be what? You don't have time for your significant other, for your children, separately, together, as a family, right? So you have all these different things, and that is the battle that we're facing, right? But you have to have these difficult conversations with your loved ones, with your boss, with your friends, your colleagues. You have to have these difficult conversations of retaining attentive information. What are the habits that are producing a conflict, right? Are they negative? Are they positive? Give feedback. Those are very important. Number 2, proactive suppression response. So to have a proactive suppression response, it requires 2 things. It requires you to be reactive and proactive. In order to be a great leader, you have to manage both, right? You have to manage the reactive things that you can't control at the time, right there and then, right? Your faucet breaks, water starts running out. What's the first thing you got to do? Shut off the valve of the water, right? So you being reactive to resolve this response proactively. Proactively, right? You have to plan, organize, discuss, manage your home, your ideas, and your body. Right? Remember what I said? Wherever your body goes, your senses are affected. So if you keep on eating donuts every day, guess what? You're going to have a serious dose of diabetes. Your glucose level will go really high. I love ice cream. It's my favorite treat. I'm not fond of cakes. I'm not fond of pies, unless it's pumpkin pie. But I'm not fond of cakes or pies as much. But ice cream, give me a whole bucket of Neapolitan and I'm there. It's a party. It's a slumber party. Nonetheless, in order to be a great leader, you have to be able to manage both. Okay. Number 3, be analytical. You have to have perspective. Your perception has nothing to do with it. Again, be analytical. You have to have perspective. I'm going to put it to you in another way. Walk in my shoes so that you could understand me. That's perspective, right? It's kind of like a compass, right? A person lives in the north, they're not the same as a person that lives in the south, and vice versa, or east or west. Never eat soggy waffles. Nonetheless, go through what I'm going through or walk what I walk through, and you will understand me. Right? So, number 4, become regulative or regulative and versatile. To be regulative or regulative and versatile, you have to regulate your emotions. And you have to be adaptable. This produces resilience. So become regulative and become versatile. This produces resilience. Number 5, you have to be able to be have multi-simultaneous focus. Multi-simultaneous focus. In other words, you have to be a problem solver. No one loves more than a problem solver. You get paid to solve problems. Someone has a problem of finding listings. Who do they go to? A real estate agent. Someone has a problem of listing their property. They go to a real estate agent. Someone has a problem with hunger. Either you do it yourself, but if you're trying to save time, right, then you go to a restaurant. They're going to solve their problem of hunger. The fact that their food is good or not, then that's on you. Then that's on the owner and the cook. Someone is not managing somewhere. That means that you're more looking to sell or to gain the monetary instead of changing or impacting. By what? By flavor, right? By spices, by managing the ingredients, by managing how do you store, how you cut, the process and how you cook that particular food, right? French cooking and Italian cooking are not the same. French pastry and Italian pastry are not the same. French pastry is here, and others are here because they took the time to manage the taste, the ingredients, and the equipment, the storage, the herbs, whatever the case might be. So, just an example. You have to be multi-simultaneous focused, be a problem solver. No one dislikes a problem solver. As a matter of fact, that should be your mindset. Be your mindset to be a problem solver, but not to manage people's problems. That costs extra. All right. Number 6, you have to be multi-directional. What do I mean by this? Right? Sometimes you feel like your life is being pulled this way and that way by different things, places, or people. By your boss, by your husband or wife, by your children, by your family, by friends, right? You have to be multi-directional. But what I'm clearly trying to focus on is you have to be a decision maker and a direction taker. There's two sides of the coin. You have to know that when you make a decision, you have to know that you're responsible by it. Take responsibility of your decision making and make up your mind that sometimes it will come out good and sometimes it will come out bad. However, also make up your mind that those decisions will affect you, your closest to you, and anyone in your ambient, right? So anyone that is near your ambience or your atmosphere will get affected. A direction taker. You have to be able to take direction as well, but you have to be able to direct as well. This is called delegation. So you have to know which path you're going to as well. Think about when you were thinking of switching or going freelancing. You were working for a particular company. You were working for an industry for a long time. You were good at it. You're like, man, I got to make a decision. Do I keep here and be miserable for the rest of my life? Or do I take a direction of where I'm planning to go, of what I love to do? So you have to be able to think about that as well. Number 7, you got to know, or well, rather, number 6, multidirectional, a decision maker, a direction taker. It's about the how, the when, the what, and with whom. The why is not important. Why did this happen this way? Why couldn't I have done a better job? Why people don't respect me or don't listen to me? Why people brush me off? Lord, why did this happen? Why did you have to do it this way? Do you remember the story of Job? The story of Job is poetic, right? The writer writes it poetically. And it's about Job relating his virtues throughout the things that are going on in his life amongst his friendship, his friends. That's what the book of Job is. And a friend comes up to him and says, hey, you should curse the Lord, or the Lord is, this has happened to you because of that. Another friend came and says, hey, this happened to you because of this and that. His wife came into him and says, hey, stop praising the Lord. Why do you still praise this Lord that, oppresses you and depresses you? And he's like, no. And then Job came up to a point to where he was like, Lord, why do you do this? And then the Lord came, his voice, a thundering noise came and says, tell me who I am, he said. Do you know why? If you know what I know, then why do I separated the waters with the land? And why is it there that the water doesn't overflow over the land? And he starts giving them an example as to why he is God, as to why he's the beginning and the end, why he's the Alpha and the Omega, why he's the God of gods, right? And the Lord of lords, why he's the King of kings, right? And then he said, and then Job just bows down on his head and just says, forgive me, Lord, right? You don't know. I mean, but one of the secrets, and it's in, I believe, Psalms, if I'm not mistaken, 90 or 91, one of the Psalms, it says that David was after God's heart, right? So what that means is like David was like, Lord, I want to know what your thoughts are. When I wake up in the morning, I said, Lord, or Holy Spirit, what do you want to reveal to me today? Is that? And then I meet him halfway. Well, Lord, I'm working on this. Bless it. But what do you want me to learn, to hear, to see? What do you want me to say? Where do you want this body to go? What do you want this body to do? That's what I ask him. And I think you should start asking him that as well. Number 7, categorizational function. What is categorizational function? It's to have a function mind and let it be categorized. Categorizational function is the functions that are categorized in order. In other words, in order to categorize or to function correctly, you have to be essential. When you read the Bible and when you're faced with a decision, important decision, you have to be essential. Number one. Number two, you have to think fundamentally. Number three, you have to think separately. And number four, you have to think collectively. Right? Again, this goes in all the categories. Your home. That is what kingdom is. Kingdom is supposed to influence every part of your life. The kingdom of heaven is like, it says the word, and the kingdom of heaven is like. The kingdom of heaven is like, and the kingdom of heaven is like. That's what Jesus Christ, that was his real ministry. So, categorizational function is to be essential, to think fundamentally, separately, collectively. This is the true creativity. Some people think creativity just pops in their head. Oh, how did you come up with that? Oh, it just popped in my head. That is not true. Because in this point, if you weren't thinking essentially, meaning what is the real message, or what am I supposed to do, or what am I supposed to see? What am I supposed to be doing now? What am I supposed to be saying? What am I supposed to be listening to right now? What am I supposed to be watching? What am I supposed to be reading right now? If you're reading books about love stories, about how Jack and Jill went up the hill, would that really impact your life? Maybe when you were 5 years old. Yeah. Don't get me wrong. I still love watching cartoons. I still like watching, memorable, the Flintstones. And, it takes me back to a place that I had a great fundamental times in my younger life, adolescent life. So this is the true creativity. You have to know the functions or function, and you have to categorize them. Example, this, that, these, those. These are called demonstrative speech or language, or adjectives or verbs. Not verbs, but pronouns. So when you speak, what's this about? Hey, is that going to help me, or is that going to affect me? These people that I'm hanging around with, or these places that I'm going, is it really adding to my life so that I could teach, mentor, and succeed? So these are called the demonstrative pronouns and adjectives. This, that, these, and those, right? Each time I look at and it's tough with like music, it's tough with like movies and stuff like that. I can't, can't sit here and lie to you, be like, oh, I don't watch this. I do. Yeah, I sometimes watch something. But is your mind mature enough to take it in a way that is not going to affect you? This, that, these, or those, right? So that's called categorizational functions: the essential, the fundamental, the separate, and the collective. That's true creativity. And number 8, you have to be a pattern identifier, right? A pattern identifier is basically involves identifications of trends, inconsistencies. In other words, be an insider, not an outsider. In means to be inside, through, within, right? In the Bible, it talks about Jesus Christ saying, no one comes to the Father if it's not through me. So which makes me think I appreciate these other ideologies, Confucianism, right? Confucius. I appreciate his teaching. I appreciate Muhammad's teaching. I appreciate Buddhism. You know, but I know that all of those people said, "Go there," but Jesus Christ said, "Come to me." A pattern identifier as well can be relative to your home, your relationships. Again, all these are compacted or a part of. The name Emmanuel means exactly this. It means the letter E means to be inside through something or someone, or through a place, but also means to be within. So we have E. Then we have man. The word man means Adam, or the word Adam, right? So we got E, a man, or the word humus, which means is the Greek or the Latin word for human, right? And then you got Newell, Emmanuel, which means with us. So we have a God, that's the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, which he's a spirit inside a man that's humus, that's dirt, that's an atom or is Adam, that is with us, not only physically, emotionally, and spiritually. Emmanuel. Do you get it? So, pattern identifier means to identify or the identification of trends and patterns, right? This is called to have discernment. That is what discernment means, is to be able to have a identification of patterns and trends within people, places, or things. This is kingdom. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope that you guys rejoice. And it is a true honor. You know, I do this because I love it. And I know that this is something that is within me and given to me, right? And I'm using it to influence and to impact. You see that I was not talking religious. You see that I was talking kingdom, business, logistics, management, administration. This is the true kingdom theology and the true kingdom mindset, to influence and to impact, to have a business plan. That's what Jesus did. He had a business plan with his disciples. To strategize. He strategized his dominion, right? As king, you have to strategize your dominion and territory. He had the message. The kingdom of heaven is like. He didn't say the religion of heaven. He didn't say worship. He didn't say blood, right? He didn't say the preaching of abundance, right? All this will come after. He said, do not worry about what you're going to drink, what you're going to eat, or what you're going to wear, nor do worry about where you're going to live. Right? He said, preach this kingdom, this message, the kingdom of heaven. In this case, once he strategized, he gave succession. Before there's any success, there has to be mentorship. And finally, the business plan, the strategy, the success, and mentorship, thus creating a common wealth. Notice that I didn't put strategy of success and wealth. I place business, how to influence and impact, business plan, strategy of success, and common wealth. Because a king's wealth is common to all his citizens, not members. His citizens reflect the wealth of his king. You know, I no longer talk about slaverytude in religion. I talk about kingdom impact, both in the sectors of business, influenced by kingdom principles. So that means I could go into any room, I could speak with doctors, attorneys, because I know the statutes and laws of kingdom. And that influences and impacts. What that means is that my attitude, my aptitudes will take me to my altitude. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope it was impactful, and I hope it was influential. If you like this, you can always hit a like. You could share. I go live because I want people to know that this is going on right now, that I prepare for this, sometimes days, weeks, not for my gain, but for the glory and purpose of the Lord, right? I hope you like this. Thank you. Enjoy your evening. I hope you have a good night.